Sebastian Vettel has hinted once more that he's looking towards coming back from retirement sooner rather than later, and considering the massive project Audi is currently working on, this isn't that far-fetched of a scenario to happen. With all of his activities regarding the carbon neutral nature of F1 and the pledge the sport made in order to make this happen in 2030, with the massive boost of 50-50 towards electrification from 2026 onwards, Vettel might want to explore his ambassadorial role while being on the track and legitimately have a shot at the 5th championship title while making yet another German team great. So, is Sebastian going to follow in the footsteps of his childhood hero and idol, Michael Schumacher, and make a graceful return to the sport? Well, it goes without saying that Vettel's retirement announcement took the sport by storm, and while there weren't many indicators towards this happening, it seems like the German driver is considering returning to the sport as quickly as he did announce his retirement. Sebastian has spoken multiple times about how quickly retirement life can get boring, especially after the fact that he was able to see the majority of his former colleagues coming back into the sport after taking a couple of years off, such as Raikkonen, Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso. Another huge factor that would contribute to the quicker return of Vettel is definitely the carbon neutral agenda that the sport is pushing towards happening, with 2026 being the first major step towards this scenario actually taking place in the sport. Sebastian Vettel has taken on the role as the sport's ambassador and seemed to have continued fighting for environmental changes even after it, with his latest move in Suzuka proving that he's still a lot to achieve as one of the most influential figures in Formula 1. Regardless, he also realises that without a proper F1 seat, his actions are going to be limited because his reach to the sport will be under a huge question mark, which then again prompts the question, are we going to see him back in the sport? There are numerous indications towards this scenario happening, with the latest one coming from Vettel himself, as he spoke about making a debut in another motorsport category, such as with the Porsche-powered sports car team Jota. It's clear to us that Vettel cannot stay off track, but whether this experience will satisfy his emptiness that comes from not competing in Formula 1, time will tell. Or maybe we don't have to wait for time to tell, because Vettel himself excluded the option of not returning to the sport in his lifetime and said that there is nothing else like competing for race wins and podiums in F1, something that Alonso is doing in his place right now with Aston Martin. What's currently happening with Vettel strongly reminds us of what happened with Michael Schumacher back when the 7-time world champion retired from Ferrari, and then a couple of years later he made a sensational comeback with Mercedes. 3 years later, you had Mercedes on top of the world for 8 sensational consecutive seasons, and it goes without saying that Vettel would be more than delighted to have his effect on Audi, a team that comes from the same country as he does, and a team that's already expressed their interest in having the 4-time world champion as a starting driver from 2026 onwards. Audi themselves said they were expecting a 3-year struggling frame before they compete for race wins and championships, and as all things stand, Vettel's comeback window is slowly but surely complying with what Audi has in mind. With 3 years away from entering the sport, Audi made it very plain and simple that they do not plan on showing up to the grid just for the sake of it and being the backmarkers of the grid, also adding that their dream lineup would consist of 2 German drivers. Sebastian Vettel has yet another mission that he might want to embark on, the return of Mick Schumacher, and while the younger German is on a steady track right now, considering the fact that he's the reserve driver of Mercedes and the reach of the Silver Arrows goes far and beyond when it comes to looking for a starter driver seat, this may not be the reality of Mick after all. Yes, Wolff has praised his influence in the team and his late night hours in the factory regarding the setup of the W14 and helping Russell and Hamilton with their fair share of work, but nothing replaces being on a team that has a clear goal ahead of them, which is something that Audi would become from 2026 onwards. Now, one of the key factors that Vettel indicated the sport needs to implement in order to pique his interest in a return to it would be adopting environmentally friendly choices like synthetic fuels. Obviously, this is something that is taking place in 2026, and this is definitely something that's lured Audi to the sport, which is why, slowly but surely, all pieces start to fall into their own place. But what does Vettel have to say about this matter? When asked about whether he would follow the names of Prost, Lauda, Mansell, Raikkonen and Alonso in terms of returning to the sport after a break, Vettel said, "I can't say no because you don't know. I think it's something that if you asked all of them, probably some of them would have said no and some of them would have said I don't know. But in the end all of them came back, so I can't exclude it. It probably will depend much on when, and obviously it's not endless, because at 36 it's not like, yeah, in 10 years time, maybe I think about it, then time has passed. It will depend on the challenge, whatever, but it's not in my head right now. I'm enjoying the sort of outlook of the challenge of what to do next. But these statements are something that will have a massive impact on the future of the 4-time world champion, because his retirement came as fast as a thunderbolt and not many were expecting him to withdraw at the age of 36. When you look at Alonso, who is scoring podiums at the age of 42, and Hamilton, who is pushing towards becoming an 8-time world champion at the age of 38, then you wouldn't really exclude Vettel from participating in race wins and potentially even a championship at the age of 40. There will be a couple of conditions set from his side, and one of them might be in terms of who will drive with him. Before he officially left F1, he was asked who he thinks is the best replacement for him in the Aston Martin, a question to which Vettel replied with a bit of bias: Mick Schumacher. It's evident that he feels he needs to transfer all of his knowledge to his idol son, especially after the condition in which Michael is right now. And if that doesn't motivate him enough to come back to the sport, then I don't think that any of the other reasons would cut the deal. But we must be honest and say that while Sebastian and Mick share a strong relationship, there are some other obvious candidates that Audi would be more than keen to take other than the younger German driver, such as Carlos Sainz, Valtteri Bottas, and maybe even Lando Norris. We mustn't forget the fact that the CEO of Sauber, the company that Audi has bought out and entered the sport with, is Andreas Seidel, the former team principal of McLaren, and he shares a lot of common ground with Sainz and Norris regarding this matter. However, the good news for Alonso is that Seidel also has a very high opinion of him and has labelled him as one of the favourites for the starting spot. Furthermore, it seems like Norris's question will be fixed before the beginning of the 2025 season, with Red Bull being the strongest candidate to sign him other than McLaren. As for Sainz, the Spaniard has slowly but surely started to find strong performance ground in Ferrari, something he managed to confirm with back-to-back poles in Monza and Singapore, and with a race win in the latter one, standing as a favourite to take the #1 role in Ferrari once they finally managed to build a championship car. Now, the question that remains to be answered is whether or not Vettel will have a strong will to return to the sport, and more importantly, whether or not he'll try to persuade Mick Schumacher in Audi as well. One thing is for sure, the sport is definitely moving in the direction that Vettel would love it to move, and he may want to be fully hands-on for every change that's happening for the betterment of the environment that we're living in. With that being said, it's evident that lots of changes are coming in the upcoming years, and the project that Audi is preparing to enter the sport might be too big of an opportunity for Vettel to turn down. So our question to you guys would be, do you think that Vettel will return to the sport in 2026? Let us know in the comments down below.